Our last speaker before lunch, I'm really excited about because, come on up, Jeff, come on. I met Jeff, I think, was it at DockerCon in 2015?
It was at DockerCon, yeah.
Yeah. And we met because when one is trying to run containers in production in 2015, you need all the help you can get, talking to each other, getting to know each other, and hearing about, and even there was a former coworker of mine from Drama Fever who ended up working at Grubhub. So I know that there's been cross-pollination of ideas there. But the stuff that you folks have been doing, I basically just want you to share with everyone here how even when you're using some of the exciting cutting edge stuff, there's still a lot more to this DevOps thing. So give it up for Jeff.
I'm not a middle-aged white guy. So we'll go ahead and start with that. So we're going to talk about Grubhub and our DevOps journey. We're going to have a little bit of a downer in a way because we want to talk about the things that go wrong, right? We've heard a lot of great stuff about what's perfect, what's awesome about DevOps, but we're going to get a little bit into the details of the things and the problems that we ran into implementing this, and hopefully we can prevent you guys from running into the same problems. Quickly, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Jeff Smith. I manage the site reliability engineering team at Grubhub. My Twitter handle is Dark and Nerdy if anybody wants to reach out on Twitter. Or you can email me, Jeff@allthingsdork. We're hiring, have to do the plug. It's a great company to work for. You will put on 15 pounds in the first month, but with a lot of hard work and dedication, maybe you can get rid of it. And one thing I do kind of want to comment on too is that the effort to make this lineup diverse really is felt. And when you see it and you're part of a minority group, it really does make a difference and make you feel comfortable and welcome in that space. So I think it's important that we call those people out for really helping make this an inclusive community. Because when I saw the list of speakers, when I saw the speaker lineup, I'm looking at it and I'm like, hell yeah. And I sent it to a friend. She's like, hell yeah. So that's duly noticed. So now onto the terrible stuff. So I'll give the caveat that I am definitely that guy that when he hears about new technology, the first thing I say is like, well, what about this really random edge case that you're probably never going to run into in production? Yeah, your solution's not going to work. You've been burned enough times, right? And you kind of get hesitant about anything that's getting all the buzz and all the hype, and you're just a little bit worried about, all right, but what's waiting around the corner for me, right? What is it that's waiting to go wrong? I judge my engineers' experience with a tool by how much they hate it, right? It's like, you like this too much. I don't think you've got enough experience with it yet. Eventually, this is going to come around and bite you. So I just want to put that caveat out there as I'm talking about this, that, we're talking about my experiences. I'm sharing them with you. It's not the gospel, but, it is what it is. Rainbows, unicorns, right? DevOps. Everything is amazing. It's going to come in. It's going to solve all your problems, and you're not going to have any issues. 90% of that is true. DevOps is an amazing thing. It's done wonderful cultural changes for us in the organization. We've gained the benefits of being able to do continuous deployment. We do frequent deployments. I think last I checked, we do something like 75 deployments a day. That's up from 1 a week just a year ago. So the benefits are very palpable. But with all the fluff, with all the rainbows and unicorns, there are some problems that you run into. So we want to make sure that we have gotten further along in our DevOps journey where we can kind of be critical of these things without necessarily saying that, oh, DevOps is bad. Because I think once you reach a certain maturity point, you have to start talking about the negatives in order for you to get past the hype cycle. So the first thing we said is why DevOps, right? It's easy to latch on to this thing that's new and exciting and everybody's talking about it, but what are the problems that you're actually trying to solve? Because when you ask yourself that question, you might quickly realize that there are other organizational issues that you need to address before you can bring DevOps in and just magically change everything. So for us, some of the things we were really looking at is the classic code tossed over the fence mentality, right? I'm developing it, I'm done, I'm pushing it to production, and now it doesn't even exist in my mind anymore. How do we eliminate that? The other thing is that as automation tools and operational tools became more sophisticated, we realized that our operations staff really lacked a development mindset. And the developer mindset is really sort of necessary to kind of really take full advantage of these things. At the same time, though, we noticed that our developers didn't really have an operational mindset. You know, we'd say like, oh, so how do you know if this thing is working? It's like, well, it gives a 200 response. And you're like, okay, but how do you know it's working, right? Like, I can give you 200 responses all day, right? So there was just sort of that disconnect between the two groups. The other thing, and I think this is classic, is like the coordination of resources was always too late. Anytime you had a shared resource, right? The resource on the receiving end found out about it probably about 20 minutes before the thing was going to go live. And that was just not sustainable for us. So those were some of the key things we were like, all right, if we look at this DevOps thing, maybe this can help us solve some of these problems. So with our initial DevOps rollout, I think the one thing that really resonated with me was the idea behind culture, right? And making sure that the culture was in place to prop up all these changes. One of the things we said was like, all right, we're gonna have to mix up everything, right? Our team structures, tooling, tool change, everything's gotta be on the table. Now, the interesting thing about that, though, is when you start talking about team structure, you have to remember that now we're out of the technology realm. We're talking about people, right? And people are really the more difficult part of this industry that we're in. Technology is relatively easy. It's dealing with people and making sure that people feel valued, they don't feel like they're getting steamrolled over. Those are the parts that can become complicated when you're doing your initial DevOps rollout. When you basically say like, yeah, we're gonna take ops teams and we're gonna put them in dev teams, the first thing that people start thinking is like, oh, so a developer is gonna do my job now? No. We're talking about putting you two together, working side by side. And without the empathy necessary for those types of changes, things could have gone really south. So make sure you're thinking about people when you're talking about some of the organizational changes that might have to happen in order to implement DevOps in your company. So we had a few DevOps org structures that we were kind of looking at because we did say, all right, you know, this isn't going to be something that we're just going to say we're doing. We want to actually, you know, put some meat behind it. So there were a few things that we were looking at. There was the ops team being embedded inside of a development team, right? So the developers and the operations teams are on the same team with the same reporting structure, and they're working side by side. The other option was still having dev and ops, and then having a very defined engagement process, right? So when the developer needs someone, they know who they go to directly, they know exactly what the process is for engaging that person. We try to strip away as much process as possible so that they feel comfortable doing it with a minimal amount of muss and fuss. And then the other thing we looked at was the typical third silo, right? You have dev, you have ops, and you have DevOps. So you basically get to postpone the problem for a couple years, which is always exciting. So this is what our org structure looks like now. We kind of did like a hybrid thing. So one of the things that we immediately noticed was that, well, because we have our roots as a startup, the operations staff do a lot of things that aren't necessarily related to product. How do we deal with that if we put these operations folks in the product teams? You know, who's going to worry about, you know, maintenance, security patches, MySQL updates, things like that. And when we talked about a lot of people, when we talked to a lot of different people that were in the DevOps community, they were like, oh, everyone just cares about it and it's going to work. And we're like, yeah. It's probably not going to work for us. So what we came up with was basically we embed our operations staff, but we still have a completely separate infrastructure organization. So the ops team members are embedded in their stream teams. So they work directly with the stream teams. They're part of their sprint review process, but they still have a separate reporting structure into me and then ultimately into the VP of engineering. That allows us the flexibility for teams to have dedicated resources that they can go to without having to go through me and say, hey, can I borrow some of Bob's time? But at the same time, gives me the flexibility to say, hey guys, we've got this major security vulnerability. I need to steal like 20% of your SRE's time so we can push this stuff out. And so far it's been working okay. There's obviously some caveats, as with anything. I'm all about trade-offs. Everything's a trade-off, right? Like any decision you make, there's a bad side to it, but knowing is half the battle. Ironically, the other half is violence, so that's Kind of like a perfect example of the trade-off scenario. So there's some benefits to our choice. We had closer team engagement. We have a renewed focus on alerting and monitoring, which is super helpful because now that operations team members are embedded in the stream teams, right? Like even before the developer staff started getting paged directly, there was someone on their team that was in pain, and they saw it all the time, right? Like, oh man, you look terrible. Yeah, I was up till 3 a.m. because the service took a crap on itself, and we couldn't quite figure out what was going on, and we didn't have any metrics or monitoring to really nail it down. Oh, we'll have that solved by lunch. Awesome. Larger tool set selection. Another interesting thing, real quick, how many people identify as operations here? And how many people identify as developers? Okay, so everyone will be probably familiar with this story. As operations folks, right, like historically we are used to things happening to us, right? It's like, oh, this technology happened to me, right? Like one day I suddenly had 2 new database engines that I had never heard of, but there was some product that needed it, and suddenly now I have to know about Firebase. As a result of that though, ops people kind of develop sort of like a callous reaction to anything new, right? That they weren't involved with, right? So it's like, oh, we're thinking about implementing this. Nope, not interested. Take it somewhere else. Now that the ops staff, though, are part of the team, they're involved in this decision-making process early, and therefore they are much more excited about these changes. So now they're coming to me like, hey, boss, I want to implement Firebase. And I'm like, that sounds crazy, but you seem really excited about it. It's like, yeah, I've been talking with the team, and this is going to be awesome. So as a result of this, we've noticed that there's a larger selection of tools available to developers because operations staffs are invited early on in the process, and they get bought into the idea as well. And there's a huge reduction of us versus them, right? Because us and them, it's not a thing anymore because you're sitting next to them, right? So that's a huge win for us. That's not changing. All right. Now the bad and the ugly part. So one of the things that popped up first was now that we've got our ops team embedded into stream teams, we've got a group that's really has 2 masters, right? They're serving 2 masters. They've got me, who's pushing them about security updates, and then they've got their team leads that's pushing them about product updates, right? So one of the things I did recently was I polled my team to get an idea of how much time we were spending in work. 45% of the things that my team did was product related, okay? 22% of that was meetings. Why? Because now they're involved in all these meetings that they weren't part of before. All the things we begged for, now we hate, right? We're like, you guys never invite us to any meetings, man. We never know about this stuff. Now it's like, we're always in meetings, man. You guys can't get anything done. But it's a real thing, right? Because if we're saying that they're part of the team, we want them to be at the table, right? But there are a lot of meetings now that they just have to be part of. They're part of stand-ups, but guess what? I'm not gonna let my guys have a stand-up without me, so now they've got the SRE stand-up right after their team stand-up. Then they got their site reliability engineering team meeting, because we're a distributed team, so now we gotta get all together and meet. Then they've got their sprint review meeting, their sprint planning session. That's 5 meetings already, right? And I'm sure there's more that come up. So that just leaves a little bit of time for all of the other things that are traditionally operational things, right? Incident management, right? Maintenance, proactive monitoring, proactive analysis, right? Oh, this thing broke. When we look at the graph, we realize it's actually been breaking for the past 2 weeks. Why didn't we notice? The trend was there because we didn't have time to review all the graphs, review all the charts, because we're constantly jumping from one thing to the next. Context switching. I hate context switching, it's so expensive. I'm actually looking at buying security vests for my team so that they can basically wear it and say, if I'm wearing this vest, don't talk to me. Because it's expensive for someone to come up and say, hey, are you busy? Were my headphones on, right? Was I staring at a terminal? Yes, I'm busy. Oh, okay. I got this problem. And you're like, why'd you even ask me? If we were just going to go jump to that, just get right into it. So the context switching is expensive, and it ends up making everything take a little bit longer. Because for me, especially if you're not a full-time developer, my team has a lot of development skills. They're not full-time developers, so when they context switch, getting back into that mindset is effort. It's energy spent, right? You got to find the right Pandora list. That can take forever. But you really got to get back into the mindset, and that break is difficult sometimes. And then obviously, serving two masters is always problematic because our incentives never in line, right? They never align. So the team lead is pushing them for products, I'm pushing them for stability, I'm pushing them for maintenance updates, and it can be quickly frustrating. So at least we're aware of it and we're conscious of it, so it's helping, but those are some of the org issues that we've run into. Along with that is priorities. We kind of hinted on that a little bit, right? How many of you guys know exactly what your top priority is and at all times feel comfortable with what you should be working on, right? Am I right? No? Huh. Yeah, well, that's some of the problems that we ran into as well. Because again, they're serving two masters. But then also we have to balance the ops intake process for work, right? The team sees this resource, and even though we say you've got a 60% resource, that math doesn't compute, right? It's like, I'm gonna keep giving you work until you throw up, right? I'm just gonna keep feeding you, right? Eventually you're gonna tell me to yell uncle or something. But that becomes immediately stressful for the team member. It creates a lot of work back and forth between me and the team leads because we have to constantly negotiate on priorities, right? And honestly, sometimes it's just a conversation is easy because I can just say, hey, this thing that I'm working on is kind of important. Can I take Bob's time? And it's like, oh yeah, sure. But if we're not in constant contact, then that quickly gets lost, and my SRE resources are swamped, and they're like, well, I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be working on. Same thing for the developer too, because my SRE guy is pushing them for additional monitoring, additional metrics, and they're weighing that against feature sets, and they're like, well, who's gonna make that decision? Then it's me and the team lead again arguing it out, and then we gotta bring it up to the product person, the product manager, and the product manager's like, well, I need to increase conversion, and we're like, well, you can't increase conversion if the system's down, and if the system's down, we probably wanna know about it, which today we don't. So those are the types of conversations that you need to figure out. What is your prioritization process? Make sure everyone understands it, and make sure there's a strict engagement process for figuring that out. Who are the players involved? Who gets to make the final decision in the tiebreaker scenario? But prioritization is key. I'm sure all of you know because you're wondering what you should be working on right now instead of listening to me. When you start blurring the line between dev and ops, there's also another series of questions, right? One of the other things that we constantly heard is like, oh yeah, everyone has access to production. And I'm like, everybody? Really? Like, that doesn't make me feel comfortable, all right? But at the same time, we're saying developers, you guys are now on the hook for production as well. We're DevOps. All right, where's my login? You don't get a login. Okay, how do you solve that? Well, one of the first things you can do is like instrument the hell out of everything, right? Like make sure you've got metrics and monitoring going to some dashboard. We use Datadog, but anything. God bless you, Nagios, if you need to, already. But find something that you can start instrumenting as much data as you can and pushing it out so that you can easily give that access to everyone. And then quickly transition to the world where your ops staff are doing the same thing, where they don't have to log into these systems or servers. But it is difficult to establish co-ownership, but then still divide the rules in terms of how people get access to data. I want to repeat that again because it's important. It's difficult to get co-ownership if you continue to divide how people access data, because that is a clear indicator that your own humanity won't allow you to accept, right? You'd be like, well, obviously we're not on the same team because you've got all this access that I don't. Being on call sucks. Sucks, right? Like, and it's always at the worst time, right? So that was another exciting thing. Devs, you're carrying pagers. Starting now. You're not getting production access either, though. So then the other problem we run into is like, okay, so now everybody's on call. But that doesn't make a ton of sense because not everybody knows everything about every system, right? Most of us don't even know a ton about the current system that we're supporting. So putting everyone on call isn't extremely helpful, right? So then we say, all right, we'll do the on-call rotation per team. All right, sweet, but now we've taken up this team that was 15 people in an on-call rotation that was once every 12 weeks or whatever, right? And now we're saying 4 people are responsible for this thing, right? It leads to burnout really fast, right? It also leads to specialization in your SRE teams and as your developers, but like, for the developers, that's kind of how they're structured. But for the SREs, we kind of want to pretend like we can take an SRE and plug them into another team. But once you have that sort of tight-knit on-call process and all that, information gets specialized really, really quickly. And more importantly, because there's not this third group that's involved, the need to document it or actually like write something down becomes nil, right? Because all the people that are getting the page are in a very tight-knit circle. So what ends up happening is our documentation suffers. So we have to have someone externally kind of come in and say like, hey, when this thing broke, what did you guys do? I know that all the 4 of you know it, right? But one day you guys are gonna be on a boat celebrating some new release, and then something's gonna blow up. What do I do? So documentation becomes key, and then having someone external from the team review that documentation. The other thing we're experimenting with is just rotating SREs out every so often, right? So it's like, all right, your 8 weeks tour is up. We're bringing in Phil. Phil's gonna rock shop for a little while. The woes of the audit. So how many of you do any responsibility for audit work, right? So one of the things that we instantly saw with DevOps is said, now that we've got all this developer experience, we should start leveraging the developer experience to automate a lot of the audit stuff, right? That would be awesome. But the catch was that now that we've added to the number of people that are accessing production systems and whatnot, our controls started to slip a little bit because there wasn't that strong delineation. So how do you make sure that this new increased level of access that people are getting isn't impacting your ability to meet particular audit requirements, okay? I think the thing that we discovered most was that we were our own worst enemies in a lot of scenarios. Because most auditors, unless you're doing like PCI or something like that, most auditors are like, tell me what you do. Now show me that you do that. You don't want to prove that you don't do that? Don't say you do it. It's really just, say what you do and then show me that you're doing what you say. So review your audit controls and make sure that they all make sense, right? Because a lot of times, people are just going out, all right, Google, what are audit standards? Yeah, we're going to implement all that. And it doesn't make sense in a lot of scenarios. We change control, all changes. Do all changes really need to go through change control? Is that necessary? Can we set up some sort of tier where we know that particular systems we've isolated need to go through change control, right? Because I'm changing the font color on this website, do I really need to put in a change ticket for that? And what value is that adding to the process, Frank upstairs is like, oh yeah, sure, right? Thanks, Frank, right? Way to lock it down, appreciate that. And then you're always tracking him down, right? Because he's never there when you need it, so it's just useless. So, review it and make sure it actually makes sense. We're also starting to get creative with our audit controls. Now that we're starting to move to like a centralized deployment system, right? We can then programmatically isolate these systems and implement the processes automatically. So you go into Jira, you click a button, that calls out to the deployment service. The deployment service says, hey, this thing needs change control. Does it exist? Let me verify that that's there and through the proper approvals. No, this doesn't require change control. I can deploy it now. Oh, but wait, there's a rule that says you can't deploy between 6 and 8 on Tuesdays when it's a full moon. So we're gonna reject this and postpone it till later, right? There's all types of things that you can do. So also think about how you can get creative with your audit controls. Be wary of the third silo. So when we talk about the third silo in DevOps, we typically talk about the DevOps team, right? But it's very, very common and easy to accidentally create a third silo without noticing it, right? So like when we were originally starting the DevOps movement, we were all operations, and we had a NOC that was sort of responsible for monitoring. And then we had the site reliability engineers that were sort of like the seniors of that team. Then we said we're doing DevOps. Sweet, we implement DevOps, but we only move the senior folks into the dev teams. We're doing DevOps now, we've eliminated all silos. Meanwhile, the ops guys are upstairs like, what the hell is going on? Like, new services are just popping up left and right. Oh, don't worry about it, the dev team is gonna handle that. Oh, okay, but it's paging me. What am I supposed to do with this, right? We accidentally created a third silo and didn't realize it. You also can create third silos with other groups because some of us are in organizations where storage and networking are separate teams, right? And it's sort of like Stockholm Syndrome in a way, but like when you guys were all the other, right? When it was you with operations and storage and infrastructure, you guys were all together like, yeah, man, we never get communicated to. Then you get pulled out And you're like, bye guys, good luck with all that information you don't get. And they're like, okay, now we're the outlier, right? So it's very easy to accidentally create those third silos. So make sure you keep an eye out for that and figure out how you can integrate them and bring them into the fold. One of the things that we started to do, because networking doesn't really care about every single product announcement, right? But what we started doing was creating these operational review meetings where we can invite networking, we can invite storage, and we can say, here are the trends that we're seeing in these different services. Here are the new services that we see coming on board. And we'll do it maybe once a quarter, right? Frequently if the changes are more frequent. But this at least gives networking, storage, an opportunity to say, oh, I didn't know about this thing. Let me ask a couple questions. Hey, this is going to have an impact on our VPN tunnel or whatever, so thanks for the heads up. I can make changes appropriately. The other thing with the third silo is that the ownership of production gets even muddier, right? So now we've got this ops team that is responsible for production, unless it's a product that was implemented directly by a stream team. Then it's not theirs. Unless the stream team came to them and said, hey, we want you guys to be on call for this thing, and then we'll back you up. So then when someone's like, oh, something's broke, who do we call? It's like, check the documentation that probably hasn't been updated. I'm not sure. Hit PagerDuty and just see who calls back. Be wary of DevOps byproduct. Yeah, that's a thing. That's a thing. So much like manufacturing, DevOps produces byproduct, right? Someone's got to deal with it. Sometimes it's security, sometimes it's infrastructure, sometimes it's networking. But it very much is a thing because as we're moving fast, as we're no longer worried about the strict silos and walls that we've created, things can get a little bit messy. So you got to be careful that DevOps and your movement isn't pumping out shit. Right? So just keep an eye out for it. I wish I had an easy, fast, and hard rule, but next year I definitely will because our CISO is getting sick of it. So I'm sure next year I'll have a ton of feedback for you guys. Choosing a tool set. So, we talk a lot about culture, but tools are obviously part of DevOps as well, right? And there's Jenkins, there's Amazon Web Services, there's all these things that you could possibly do. Avoid analysis paralysis, especially if you're very, very, very early on in this stage, right? Everything sucks in its own way, right? Everything is going to have some flaw. So you can do a 3-month analysis if you want, but whatever you choose is going to be wrong. You just won't know it for 6 to 12 months. So when you go in it with that mindset, it's a little easier, right? You're like, well, does it do the 3 things I really needed to do? All right, sweet. I guess we'll worry about the other stuff later. Commit to iteration. Make sure you're doing this, you're doing something, you're trying it, you're evaluating it, and then you're making changes, and you're doing that over and over again. It's the only way you're going to get better at this. And try to find quick ways to build wins, right? You don't have to start with a mesosphere implementation in EC2 with dynamic, auto-scaling groups if really you just I want to be able to deploy with the push of a button, right? Like start with those small things that you can eliminate. Build momentum. People around that, it's contagious, right? It's like automation. We were talking about this. Automation is like a drug, right? Like when you get your first hit, you're like, oh man. Come on, man, I need some more of that automation. Can I script something for you? Please. I saw you clicking and I don't like it. So you want to find ways that you can build up quick wins, get some momentum, and just let that proliferate throughout the organization. And the last point is my favorite point. I love talking about this because I get a lot of crap for it. Solve your own problems. Don't worry about what Google's doing. Don't worry about what Netflix is doing. Like, oh, Google can auto-scale their entire environment to 110,000 nodes in 60 seconds with predictive analytics. Like, really? You have 4 customers, right? We'll get there, right? But let's start with our own problems. Right? So it's so easy to get caught up in the blogs and the Twitter sphere and hear about all these awesome solutions that these huge companies are doing that have absolutely no frame of reference for what you're working on. So don't feel ashamed if you're like, the solution's a little janky, but it works for us, and it's not something that we have to deal with anymore. So always, always, always solve your own problems. Addressing the skill set gap. So one thing we noticed is that, as we were starting to move to these automation tools, we quickly realized that not everyone had the development skills necessary. You have to have a plan for getting those people up to speed, right? Because they are still extremely valuable. They still have tons of history about your organization. They have tons of specialization in areas that people don't care about. We got this one guy, Doug. That's my boy, because anytime something with LDAP comes along, we're like, Doug, help us. You're our only hope. Right? And what takes Doug 5 minutes takes us 90 minutes of research and pouring over RFC documents or whatever. So everyone has value. For the skill sets that you don't have, it's not like you have to hire out for that. These people are capable of learning. That's how they got to where they are. So help them, train them, get them involved with people, pair them with developers, do whatever you can to help bring them up to speed. The other idea is to kind of choose a language and stick with it. For a while, we had a little bit of camp. Well, it wasn't really a fight. It was between Python and Perl, so we know how that ended. But make sure you choose a single language and kind of build on it, because it just makes it easier for everybody. Hire differently for ops as well. So Charity Majors, who I think is giving a talk here, she introduced me at one of the DevOps days to a concept that I'd never heard before. I don't know if she coined it or not, but the T-shaped engineer, right? Someone incredibly broad but deep in one particular area. That's amazing. Find those people, right? Because they are quick, they're good at assimilating information. They may not have all the buzzwords that you need in your job description, but they are immensely resourceful, useful, and you want to look for those people when you're actually interviewing for ops. You also want to put an emphasis on sort of the development mindset, right? They don't have to be rock star developers, but they have to at least be comfortable thinking from things from a development perspective. Maybe you don't have that skill set on your team currently. Bring it into the team, bring a developer into your interview process. There's nothing wrong with that. But you want to find someone that is open to the idea of thinking things through and operational issues through like a developer. Again, you can train them once they get in there, but you don't want someone that's like, well, not really into the development thing. I kind of prefer keeping my shell scripts date time version in my home directory. I remember that. 99 was awesome. Training isn't enough. You want to make sure that these guys are involved in projects, right? When we have a new ops engineer come on, we say, hey, if you're not comfortable with development, let's pair you with someone, right? Maybe we'll take Meredith, right? Hey, Meredith, can you sit with this guy and just kind of show him the ropes? Oh, yeah, sure, no problem. And quickly we'll find a project that they can work on together, right? Maybe it's an ops project specifically, and Meredith just offers assistance or help on it. Or maybe it's something that he's going to contribute to his development team with. But just something to get them involved, because use it or lose it, right? And in ops, we don't necessarily have to code every day, so that becomes problematic when you're trying to get someone learned and up to speed with a particular skill set. And just remember that not everyone is a developer, so you have to have patience with these folks, right? Just make sure you're available to them, you give them resources. It may not click for them right away, but it will. I know it will, because that's why you hired them in the first place. So we'll close out. The journey to DevOps is hard, and your journey will differ from others, but the journey is totally worth it. So that's everything I've got for you guys today. Thanks a lot. One other thing. I sped it up because I knew lunch was coming, so appreciate that.